40 days of questions, 40 shades of questions will be the sexy edition that I will do at some point. Today, I wanted to talk about inspiration. Quite a lot of people have asked, how do I get inspired? How do I find inspiration? How do I turn this feeling of wanting to do something into the kinetic action of doing it? But I think it's because I've built up in my head this like stored, positive, or at least like kinetic, forceful energy of wanting to do something in a certain way. Now, sometimes the problem with not having inspiration isn't that you don't know what you want to make a thing about, and it isn't about not knowing how to make the thing, but it's the driving power behind that and whether your way of doing something is unique or right. And I was reminded of this a couple of days ago when I went to go and see Seth Lakeman in concert. Seth Lakeman is one of my favourite musicians of all time. Seth Lakeman is an English folk writer and performer. I feel like in the world there's lots of Irish and Scottish and generally Celtic kind of voices in the music industry, but there's very few like English folk writers, and what he writes is definitely folk music. He has an electric violin and he does those of crazy things with syncopation and beats that makes it feel so modern. I thought I'd share with you a few thoughts I wrote down after the gig, which I cried in, because I realised that the reason he inspires me isn't because he does anything like what I do, but because he does it in a way that I respect and think is missing a lot from other people's way of doing stuff. And in turn, that probably does inspire me to make things in the nature that he makes them in. My belief in how things should be made and how they should be executed stops me from being so afraid of how the end product will turn out and whether that thing is good or not. Does that make any sense? Because I think a lot of people's fear around making and uploading or sharing things they've created is whether it's good or not. But I think also what's valuable is the way you make it and the thought process behind it. And that's what adds value to it. That's what makes it good. So here are 3 things that I wrote down after the concert that I think genuinely inspires me to make the things that I make. The first thing is the things that he writes about. I think a lot of the time with music, writers write songs and they write ideas because they feel it and it's about them and it's about their internal struggles with something that's externally happened. But it's also because it sometimes works because they want you to identify with what they're feeling about a breakup, about an emotion, about a situation. What I like about his music that's unusual is that Seth Lakeman trusts the sadness or the happiness or the power behind the music that he's written, and the lyrics become free of their need to be universal, if that makes sense. For example, a lot of his lyrics and stories in his songs are narratives about disasters that have happened in England historically. So they might be about horrible lifeboat disasters where lots of people died, or about old coal mine disasters, or about plagues that happened in Cornwall or Devon a long time ago. And what he recognises about the tradition of folk music is that it was also there to record histories of other people, and it's kind of up to the listener to see themselves in that and for them to empathise on their own without having to be like, this is you, this is exactly what you're feeling, play my music. And I think that's really unusual, and I realised that while I was watching him, that I really valued that like historical aspect. And if you buy some of his CDs, the little leaflets inside will tell you the history of those disasters that have kind of like been underreported or forgotten. For me, he's a musician that can contextualise themselves in history and knows that they're just part of it. And I think that's like a really humble thing to do. He recognises in this like taking on this tradition of folk music that he's not creating anything new or innovative. He's adding to a tradition that's quite ancient, and in the spirit of that, he wants to tell stories of huge communities and loss rather than like personal loss a lot of the time. The second point is that I love how sad and happy the music is. So a tradition in folk music is to make the melody really happy while talking about something really sad. And he does that with such genuine integrity. Like Poor Man's Heaven is a literal sound of hope. Like I was watching him play it and I was crying and I was like, if hope had a sound, this is what hope would sound like. But at the same time, you know he's writing about something rooted in such reality and such fact. And it's a different feeling to listening to a song that's like, don't worry, everything's going to be fine, it's just a ride. All respect to you, Gem, still my favourite song of all time. It's just a ride. But like for me, the most powerful kind of music is hope that has knowledge in it. It recognises that something shit is happening, but it still has this like undertone of hope. Also to note about this concert, it was this place called Cadogan Hall, I think that's how you say it, Cadogan Hall, near Sloane Square in London. And it's like one of the most polite venues. There's a lot of stained glass, there's lots of seating and pews, and most of the people that attended that concert, as I might have guessed, were like my parents' age and just looked very well behaved. There's a really great DVD of him live playing it in a place called the Minack Theatre in Cornwall, where I've been, which is a kind of almost Roman in the round rock theatre built into the side of a literal cliff where you can see the ocean behind. And I have watched that DVD the whole way through very silently on my own a lot of times, and I think it's beautiful. However, it was weird seeing him in a sterile environment like that, and I was like, oh, how this is going to be so well behaved, I don't know if I'm going to be into it. And he turned this almost like buttoned up Catholic almost environment into this raucous barn dance. In the space of like 40 minutes, people were dancing and spinning on the sides, and all of the people that you could tell weren't really those kinds of people were all like getting up in their seats and like being like, yeah! Because I think when real hope is present, like people can't just sit and politely receive the hope into their ears. They have to be like, you have to get up. And the last thing was Seth Lakeman, I think is kind of a big deal. And he is Seth Lakeman, like he's like, that's what all of his music is branded as. But his band had such a part in it and they were so powerful. And he also brought on the support act. The support act were really good as well. I bought their CD afterwards. They are three girls who were like, in between songs, they were talking like they were like presenting an awkward Year 9 assembly, but then as soon as they opened their mouths, the most talented, jaw-dropping, otherworldly folk singers of all time. Yeah, he brought them on a lot to do songs with him. He brought the band in so much, the band was so talented. And you can also see like the drummer in the background was like in this thing. There was a point in the gig where like you could tell he got into this groove that was so like, you know, when somebody knows that they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do in exactly the right moment and they found their place in the world for that very short amount of time. But yeah, the third thing is that at the end, he didn't take a bow on his own because he recognised that music wasn't about him. And usually when that happens, like either the artist bows on their own and then goes, oh yeah, thanks to the band as well, PS, or they bow with the band and then they take one step forward and bow on their own. And he didn't do that. And I can't think of a more powerful statement about how the music wasn't about him. So yeah, when I make things, I may not realise it at the time, but those kinds of people that I follow and I honour have made such an impression on how I make things that it stops me from worrying about whether the thing I made is perfect or that everyone will like it, because I know that the way I made it had this good intention behind it that I think is important to put into the world, even if the thing that I put into the world isn't perfect. Does that make any sense? I really hope I'll make more videos on creativity because I know you guys had a lot of questions on it. I hope that at least from this video, if nothing else, you've taken away that you should probably go listen to some Seth Lakeman, so I'll give you some links below. Thank you for watching. I'm making 40 videos in Lent. I'm still sniggering about that because I can't even believe it. We've been talking about London, we've been talking about breakups, we've been talking about careers and what your passion is. So do take a look at the playlist. Subscribe if you would like to see more, and I will see you in my next one. Frog Snog out.